The coroner's office is one that not many of us know much about. I just finished up doing an interview with Coroner Brian Treon here in Clermont County. There's currently a move afoot in the budget bill to get rid of coroners as elected positions. We talk about his office, what they do, the number of autopsies per year, but we also talk about the move to not have coroners be elected offices in Ohio anymore. Hopefully you enjoyed this interview. It's May 16th, Friday, and I'm sitting here with Dr. Brian Treon, who is the Clermont County Coroner. So coroner is one of those positions that a lot of people in the county probably aren't that familiar with. They might not, other than every 4 years, seeing Mr. Treon's name on the Dr. Treon's name on the ballot, may not be informed as to how it works, what it is. And the funny thing, Dr. Treon, as I was talking to somebody on the phone coming here, and I told him I'm on my way to the coroner's office, and I'm in a good way going to the coroner's office.
That's right.
I'm not going because a loved one had something happen. I'm not going because something happened to me. But I appreciate you taking the time to sit down with me a little bit. And we're going to talk a little bit about the coroner's office, and we're going to talk about there's currently a move to eliminate the coroner being an elected position.
Correct, yeah.
And I'm against that, and I think you're against that based on reading editorial that you were involved with. But before we jump into that, maybe if you could just talk a little bit about your background and experience of what does it take to be a coroner,
Sure.
and what kind of pedigree or skills you need to develop to be a coroner.
So it's pretty easy as far as the qualifications for coroner. It's outlined in the Ohio Revised Code, Section 313, for anyone who cares, and that is that you must be a physician, MD or DO, with active license in Ohio for the previous 2 years.
Okay.
Those are the statutory requirements.
Okay, so how long have you been the coroner for Clermont County?
I have been coroner for Clermont County since 2002.
Since 2002. Okay. Have you ever? Because I know it's kind of I won't say it's a sleepy position. It's just it's not in the political limelight. Have you ever had an opponent?
So I was appointed to a partially expired term in 2002.
Okay.
And then had to run through a special election, and I had an opponent at that time.
Okay.
And since then, apparently, either I'm doing a really great job, or no one else wants the job, but I run unopposed.
So is it just? I don't know this. So is it a office where there's a primary, where you're in the primary and then the general? So it's a partisan office.
Correct. Yes.
You're a Republican.
Correct. Yes.
When you did have an opponent the one time, was it a Republican in the primary?
It was for the primary, yeah.
Have the Democrats ever even run anybody?
Not in Clermont County. Yeah.
Not in Clermont County. Okay. Now, you said the basic requirements of physician and so forth. Now, you personally, I think I read, and then I was looking for it this morning, a little bit of bio on you somewhere. But, your personal experience when you came into this or since you've been in this with because obviously, I have a personal physician. His knowledge as it would relate to autopsies might be more limited. So maybe if you could just expand some on what's kind of the skill set or what kind of skills do you have or experiences do you have that led to you being interested in being coroner?
So back in the day, long before medical school, I actually worked in the Montgomery County Coroner's office.
Okay.
Worked as an autopsy technician, mopping floors and assisting with autopsies. Okay. So I learned a little bit about it. I actually come from a family line of elected officials.
Okay.
My father was township trustee. My grandfather was township clerk. So a little bit of that flavor in my background as well.
Okay.
Went to medical school, residency, came out with, I went to UC and came out of medical school and went to residency in York, Pennsylvania.
Okay.
Residency was emergency medicine.
Okay.
Moved back home here to Cincinnati. I've been an emergency physician here since 1997, so a while.
Okay. Now you mentioned Montgomery County, so I've kind of learned over time that when you take different counties, and I'll let you explain this, but you're going to have like this office here, to my understanding, is you're not doing autopsies in this office. You're not doing it. And it seems to me like the way it's developed in Ohio is there are sort of counties that have a focus. Like I've heard Hamilton County, Montgomery County, at least in our region, where they have more full out, and counties like Clermont tend to contract or work with one of those to do their autopsy work and do the forensics that they need. So maybe explain that a little bit.
So let's just talk about the position of coroner. Coroners don't do autopsies.
Okay.
Coroner is more of an administrative role, overseeing the office.
Okay.
I would make decisions about who gets an autopsy.
Okay.
but I don't perform the autopsies.
Okay.
As far as where those autopsies are performed, you're correct. We at Clermont County contract with Hamilton County to do our autopsies.
Okay.
The major autopsy centers are in major cities.
Okay.
Cincinnati, Columbus, Dayton, actually Butler County does their own autopsies.
Okay.
They're a little bit larger than us. They're about 400,000.
Yeah.
Clermont County is about 220.
Okay.
Toledo, the larger cities are where the autopsies are performed.
Now, when you decide to do, like, we're going to work with Hamilton County versus, say, Montgomery County, is there actually, because you're then kind of a customer of these bigger counties that are doing this, would you say, like, would they actually pitch you, like, on why Montgomery County is better than Hamilton County, or is it basically the same?
Yeah. I don't know that they're looking for business.
Yeah.
But at the same time, we are looking for the best value.
Okay.
So certainly we could go to Montgomery County if we so desired, or to Columbus or wherever. But that would also incur a greater travel cost.
Okay.
There is an expense of getting the body to the final site where it needs to be.
So just on how it kind of all works, what determines, you said as coroner, you determine what cases you want autopsies in. Is that a correct statement?
Yes, yes.
Okay, so obviously if there was something nefarious like a murder or something like that, or, but what kind of are the criteria by which you determine whether you think an autopsy is warranted or not?
Yeah, and again, it goes back to the Ohio Revised Code. It is outlined what is a coroner's case. So when a person dies suddenly, when in unusual health, under unusual circumstances, when there's a casualty, also children under the age of 2, and any MRDD individual, those cases would be referred to our office.
So so just so I understand this, there's some that are by statute under 2, MRDD. Did you say a third thing that's by statute?
And then any individual who was in previous good health.
Okay.
Any person who dies
an
of casualty.
Unusual death, basically.
An unusual death.
Okay, a person in good health suddenly turns up dead.
And what is designed at doing is to look for the nefarious cases, the cases where there's something sinister going on. So that's what we.
So if I were in good health and all of a sudden I turn up dead and my wife is, you're wondering, what happened to him?
Yeah, just as we are all born.
He just had dinner and that was it.
Just as we are all born, we are all going to die. It's going to happen.
Okay.
Not everyone needs to be investigated through the coroner's office.
So let's say an elderly person in a nursing home that's 100 years old that just succumbs to natural causes. That's not going to be something that's going to be.
That would not be something that would be mandated to contact the coroner's office. Certainly, we do take those telephone calls. We listen to the circumstances involved, and quite frankly, would say thank you for the call, but this does not fall under our jurisdiction, and we would refer that back then to the primary care physician, who would then sign a death certificate.
Okay.
So then to explain that a little bit more, on the death certificate, there are 5 manners of death.
Okay.
5 boxes. That someone can check. Okay. They are natural, the great majority. Accident, let's say a car crash or fall or
fell
whatever.
off the roof.
Homicide.
Okay.
Suicide.
Yeah.
And undetermined.
Okay.
The coroner is the only person who can check the box that's not natural. In other words, if a primary care physician signs a death certificate, it must be natural.
Because if they had a death that they thought might not be natural, they're supposed to come to you?
Correct, yes. Because those unnatural deaths require investigation. Well, what happened? Is there litigation involved? Is there culpability?
Okay.
Those are the cases that we investigate.
Now, so there's cases that are by statute, you mentioned. Then there's cases that, generally speaking, would appear to be, natural, and very little dispute about that it was natural causes.
And then what about the 30-year-old who dies? Suddenly.
Yeah.
But I just had dinner and went to bed and passed away.
Yeah.
That would be an individual who was in previous good health, and that would be referred to us. Did they overdose? Did they fall earlier in the day and hit their head, and now they succumb to that injury? So those would be investigated as well.
So that's what I was kind of going with that, is that you would be, it would seem to me like you'd be more likely to an autopsy if there was some ambiguity or question as to how this person actually died.
Yes.
And I don't want to go like, old style CSI TV show,
Yeah.
but even if an old person in a nursing home passed, but there was something suspicious or bizarre about the way that they passed.
Was that individual being abused?
Right.
Were they being neglected?
Right.
Were their needs being cared for?
Yeah.
What are the conditions of the nursing facility? I'd want to know about
So
that.
when you're making those decisions, obviously you said they're the ones that are statutory and there's criteria you mentioned, is there a financial constraint? And for example, that the more autopsies we order, the more it costs.
Yeah.
So you have to ponder that element as well.
You need to look at the entire situation. You're exactly right.
Okay.
We are sending our autopsies to Hamilton County. They're not going to do the autopsy out of the goodness in their heart.
Right.
They need to be
How much does an
reimbursed.
autopsy cost?
$1,800.
$1,800.
And then there's a transfer, or we pay transporters,
Okay.
which would be another $200.
And then if again, maybe I watch too much forensic files and stuff like this, but if then is like $1,800 a standard autopsy, and then would there be things where you might order more stuff, or it's $1,800 all in, like whatever we need to do on this autopsy?
Exactly right.
So
It's
if
all
there
in.
became like toxicology questions or something like that, if special screenings are needed.
Toxicology is included. Yes,
But-
it's $1,800.
By the way, just as a bizarre aside, my mother-in-law, who's passed a long time ago, loved watching forensic files.
Okay.
And we would go to Florida, and before my wife and I had a condo, we'd sit with her and she'd watch forensic files. And so I get watching forensic files. Do you find like a show like that is informative to the public, or it's sensational? Obviously, shows like CSI, that are purely dramatizations.
Exactly right. CSI.
What's your reaction to shows like forensic files?
Forensic files are good in that they follow a case through beginning to end.
Yeah.
They're interesting, they're educational, but at the same time, those cases that make it, wow, that was really interesting, are very,
very rare.
Rare, yes.
Very rare.
Yeah.
So since you just said that, in your career here, what would you say is the most interesting case that has ever come up?
So I had been coroner maybe 4 or 5 years. Probably even less than that.
Okay.
And I got called out to a house in Pierce Township. The individual had just moved in. There was a water cistern, and he's cleaning out the bottom of his water cistern.
Yeah.
And 6 inches of mud, and down at the bottom he comes across some bones, and appropriately called police, and police came out to us, and we went out and we climbed down in the bottom of that cistern, and yep, these are human bones. And we put them together, and it formed a human skull. So then, what the heck is going on here? Of course, they were all decrepit and broken and muddy, and really couldn't see what's going on. So we then took these to the Hamilton County Coroner's Office, and we participated with reconstructing that skull, and there's a hole in the back of the head. But there were also 2 rather strange markings on either temple, here and here. Little small punctate holes with a little rust around it.
Okay.
And it almost looks like there was a screw on each side.
Okay, like a
And
clamp.
I'm thinking back to medical school, we used to have skulls that we would look at for anatomy. And doggone it, I remember those skulls had 2 screws right here with a spring that would hold the mandible in place.
Yeah.
Now the mandible, we didn't find it. But it turns out this is a medical preparation.
Yeah,
This is for educational value.
Okay.
And we did some investigation, and it turns out that the man purchased a house from a professor of embalming. Now, we never did figure out why.
He would throw it down a cistern.
Threw it down to a cistern, but that is a...
But what you're telling me, I'm just going to make a joke here, is, because I used to joke with my wife and her mom about I was learning from forensic files. If I ever went down a bad path, I learned all sorts of things. So if I, ever became a bad guy, if I drill holes here and here,
well,
I might be able to trick somebody.
Maybe I just clued you in. Yeah, I don't know.
My biggest joke with them is I learned from forensic files is that no matter how much bleach you go to buy at Walmart, you didn't buy enough. Just buy more, because they're going to find something in that where you sprayed bleach all over your house.
That's fair enough. I'll tell you what, I'm not going to give any more trade secrets away.
Okay.
We'll just
So has there been any, that turned out not to be a nefarious case. What's the biggest, well, let me ask you two ways. One is kind of what was the highest in your tenure kind of media type case, where something, where what kind of case where something nefarious appeared to have happened?
Yeah, we were actually contacted by not Forensic Files, but I think it was a cold case files or something where we actually were interviewed on one of our cases. And it was an individual who actually, before I was a coroner, passed away. But then some new information came to light. And so we actually reinvestigated and obtained the body. And it turns out that on the the first autopsy, because it wasn't autopsy at first, found a blade of grass in this individual's airway. And it turns out that the original assumption from the previous coroner was that this individual got drunk, passed out, and fell face first with her head in the grass and passed out. Well, it turns out that this individual was having her head held down into the grass. She aspirated a blade of grass that we found. There was actually a tear on her frenulum, which is the little piece of skin on the inside of your mouth that was torn. So that led to some changes in the previous evaluation of it.
Okay. Was anybody ever apprehended per se on that?
As I recall, because this was a while ago, the culpable individual was already incarcerated.
Okay.
And so additional charges were pressed.
Okay. So let's come back to what's going on now. So let's finish out your office a little bit, and then we can talk about the move.
Sure.
So your office now, just give me some dynamics. I know you and Kenneth Mullins is listed on your website. I know Debbie. Kind of just give an overview of what is your office here. How many people?
Sure. So we have two full-time people here. Debbie Hawkins, my administrative assistant.
Okay, very nice woman. Every time I've dealt with her,
very
super
helpful,
nice.
Very professional. Ken Mullins, our chief investigator.
Yeah.
We have part-time clerical help.
Okay.
I, as coroner for Clermont County, am part-time.
Okay.
I still maintain a private practice.
A medical practice?
Emergency medicine, yes.
Okay.
I work at Bethesda North Hospital.
Okay.
I'm notified of any call that comes into the emergency department, to the coroner's office. 2 p.m. in the afternoon, 2 a.m. in the morning, they call me, they let me know. Listen to the case. Okay, we need an autopsy. Okay, we don't need an autopsy.
Okay.
Bodies would be transported to Hamilton County for those autopsies. So then, for clarity, Hamilton County obviously has a coroner as well.
Yeah.
Dr. Samarco.
Yeah.
She is the administrative head of that office.
Okay.
She hires pathologists. Pathologists are the doctors who actually do the autopsies, yes.
Okay.
So every county has a coroner, but not every county has a pathologist.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. So when something happens here, does your investigator, Mr. Mullins, does he go? Are there times when the coroner goes? Help me to understand, on a crime scene or something like that, when the coroner goes on site. My knowledge would be like television. I'm sure I don't know what really happens in real life.
Yeah.
But when does the coroner go on site on a crime scene?
Yeah. When there's sinister forces in play, homicide. We wouldn't want them to go out. When there's firearms involved, he will go out.
Okay.
Unusual circumstances. A lot of times you kind of scratch your head and what the heck happened here?
Okay.
We typically go out on most motor vehicle accidents.
Okay.
But there are some situations where it's pretty obvious what happened, and we don't really need a scene investigation. But Ken goes out on a lot.
And just because it's making me think about it, So I would assume in the area of coroner, there's a pathologist who does autopsies, but that on-scene investigator at a crime scene or something like that, that's also a very important role in evidence preservation, I would assume, and things like that. Does typically, like in our county, does the sheriff's office typically do a pretty good job of that, or is it very helpful to have your investigator there saying, don't do that? Like,
Well, the answer to yes to both questions.
Okay.
The Clermont County Sheriff's Office does a great job. They are the major police force in Clermont County, so they obviously have high volume. But there's local municipalities who
like Union Township or somebody like that.
Well, even smaller than that.
Yeah. New
Richmond.
Yeah.
For instance, Felicity.
Okay.
Where well, they don't investigate a lot of death. So while Ken certainly interplays with the sheriff's department, a lot of times we'd be going out to Felicity, where his input would be invaluable.
Yeah, where they might not, just because. And by the way, it's like anything. If you're, I'm sure the sheriff's office, if there's some nefarious situation, they know who in their office to dispatch. Who get so and so out there. Obviously, a smaller municipality or village has a much smaller, and they may never have had something like this happen. A particular crime. Let's get to the current move afoot.
Sure.
To get rid of elected. Coroners are elected every 4 years. You already said partisan election, theoretically. There could be a primary.
Correct.
And, before we get into your opinion on it, do you know what's the motivator as to why they're trying to, by the way, there's a budget bill that happens every 2 years, a biennial budget, and they put a bunch of crap in the budget that's got nothing to do with the budget. And the worst, most ridiculous part of it is when they put stuff in there where there has never been a hearing, there has never been a bill. Sometimes they'll take a bill that's already had hearings and try to slip it into the budget, which is bad also, but at least it had hearings, okay?
All right.
A lot of times they try to jam stuff in the budget with no hearings and just go, and nobody thought about it, and then it has unintended consequences after the fact.
Exactly right.
And it's some pet peeve, it's some ludicrous pet peeve that some legislator that was in power put in there. That's my editorial on how that works.
Well, you kind of set it up pretty well, as a matter of fact. So the Ohio State Coroner Association was notified of a provision that was put in House Bill 96, which is the omnibus bill
budget
that you just referenced. It's a 5,000-page document. It's a big document.
Right.
Hidden on 3 pages in that document is a reference to the coroner currently as an elected position. And it essentially took out, I mentioned previously, Section 313, and took coroner in any place where it said elected, lined out elected, and inserted the word appointed. So the movement is to make the coroner a non-elected position, in other words, appointed, and that appointment would come from more than likely the county commissioners.
Okay. And do you have any insight personally as to what is driving that at this point in time?
So I've heard of a couple of thoughts that, and I had to look, why is this happening? Only because we were not notified. There were no public hearings.
Yeah.
We were not asked for input. It simply appeared 2 days before that we were.
And if you weren't looking, by the way, for everything where you talk about an association that might pick up on it, there's hundreds of things in the budget bill that aren't things that would have an association that get jammed in there. And it's like, I'm a Republican, so I'll say it's like the Nancy Pelosi Obamacare. You'll find out what's in it after it's law. But go ahead.
So the Coroner Association became aware of it 2 days before the House voted. We didn't have any kind of input. The House passed it, and right now it sits in the Senate for further review.
Right.
The Senate is to vote on it, I think, in the beginning of June.
So, but again, it still seems like you haven't said, and I don't know, what exactly caused somebody to want to make this change?
So then there's 3 things.
Okay.
3 reasons that I after a lot of investigation. First thought is the coroner's position often goes unfilled
Okay.
in the election. And in Ohio, there are 88 counties. 10 counties had the coroner position run with no name entered for
10 out of 88. Okay.
10 out of 88, yes. No one's running, no qualified candidate is running for the position of coroner. 10.
Okay.
They have all been filled. There is no county in Ohio that does not.
And then if it's like other positions, then they would get filled by appointment by the commissioners.
Exactly right, yes. So it seems to me that there is a mechanism in place to fill open positions.
So, and do you know if it doesn't sound like it's happened here, or at least not has happened here in a long time, is I don't know if when they get appointed, then do they have to run for election in the next 2-year cycle?
Well, yes.
Because the appointment isn't for the whole term; it's until the next election, I think. Well, on most of the offices,
it would be for the whole term. The term ends with the next election. So yes.
Okay.
Okay. So that coroner, if he wanted to stay coroner, would have to run in the next election. Well, that's the society that we live in. This is called a democracy. Should that coroner not want to run, certainly that's his option. But if it's there's
I always try to put myself in the position of thinking, what if I was on the other side? Like if I was on the other side of an issue, I try to think, why would I? The only thing I could think of is, as you were talking, I started thinking, why would somebody, is that of these counties, that there's a certain number of counties and where the quality of the person that runs for coroner is low or something. That there's issues with, some doctor just realizes I can get some extra coin by being the coroner, and then they do a very ineffective job. To what degree, I'm just making that up, but I could see where it happens in a small county. Somebody gets elected coroner, they're not really doing the job, but they get the extra paycheck or what have you. And I could be a commissioner and this is baloney that we've got Joe Schmo as the coroner and he stinks. To what degree do you think that could be happening in some counties?
Well, yes, but there are ramifications. It's called the next election.
Okay.
And if a coroner doesn't do a good job, or the auditor, or the recorder, or the commissioners, they get voted out.
Okay.
That's how it works.
Okay, so
the citizens.
I was just trying to speculate what could be a rationale. I would think the other side, if they wanted to have an actual argument other than to just jam it in, would have to have, what is your argument? Like, here's 8 counties where somebody horrible got elected as coroner, and it's really had a big detriment or something. But I don't really understand, to the point of what's a Winston Churchill slogan saying, democracy is the worst form of government, save for all the others. So I see much more risk, that I try to think from the perspective of the other side. I see more risk that if it became you'd have more issues. I feel like you'd have more issues if you let commissioners appoint all these positions, because then it would be buds of the commissioners in a lot of counties.
Right. So we can explore that just a little bit more. But what the proposal is, there are 10 counties who didn't have someone run in the election. Well, that means in 78 counties there was someone who ran.
Right.
So we're proposing to change the whole system because of 10 counties. There has been a reasoning that by appointment it'll be a money-saving measure. It changes the coroner from the elected position to appointed position, but it doesn't change responsibilities. The salaries are mandated in the Ohio Revised Code. It doesn't change the salaries.
So there's no budgetary impact.
Zero.
Which then question would be, which by the way is another, I'll give a quick vent. The stuff that gets jammed into the budget, you can scratch your head going like, what exactly does this have any impact on the budget? Because if they had said, we're going to get rid of this, let's pretend somebody had a grand proposal to regionalize the coroner function or something, to have our place in Florida, I notice in Florida government, there's a lot of that kind of stuff where they've regionalized things, and that's not necessarily good or bad, but this is just weird because it's not saying we need to consolidate offices or do something like that. It's just they take it away from being an elected position for some reasons that are unclear.
I would say that we probably are pseudo-regionalized now, only because
The way the labs are structured.
we send our autopsies to Hamilton County, different counties, so that's the region.
Yeah.
So, yeah, it's regionalized, but at the same time, the control remains with the people of Clermont County,
Okay.
who
Right.
elected me as the individual who makes the decision about what to autopsy and what not to autopsy.
Uh-huh.
It's easy to order an autopsy. I could order an autopsy
All day and all
on
night.
everyone that comes
And
through
Hamilton
this
County, having that as a profit center per se for them, be glad to have you
Yeah,
keep bringing them in.
but is that in the public's best
Right.
interest? Does Grand Mal need
Right,
to
right.
have an autopsy? There's emotional
Factors.
involved.
Okay.
When people have family members have an autopsy on their
Right.
loved ones. So the difficult decision is not to perform an autopsy. The difficult decision is not to perform
Okay.
an autopsy. And that's where the investigation
Well, by the
comes in.
way, then I feel like probably, I don't know, I think I said hi to you once at another event or once or twice, but we never really have talked. And, I feel like it's a sleepy position from the standpoint of elections and so forth and politics. And that might be a good thing because I would think that my guess would be it's not very politicized where you're constantly getting called by the commissioners, do an autopsy on this, do an autopsy on that. Is that a fair statement?
I have never had contact from the commissioners with that conversation.
So it's basically separated, which it probably should be, from a political thing because right now people probably wouldn't know, go get, David Painter to get on Brian Treon's, to do an autopsy on grandma or something. I'm sure he would say, contact Brian Treon directly. As soon as you politicize it, that you're having those people do the appointments, then it's going to be those people having some sort of influence or control over what's going on in that no longer an office per se, but then just another function of county government.
This measure takes the power from the citizens and puts it into another entity.
Right.
Right now, my boss is the people of Clermont County.
Right.
I do as I think the people of Clermont County
It's a
want me to
check and
do.
balance. I think people need to understand it's a check and balance having people elected. Even though they could be like this, they could be best buds, but there's a natural check and balance. It's a natural check and balance. There's some states where sheriffs are appointed, but having the sheriff be an independently elected office, separates it. It may not make it perfect, but it makes it better than it's all a political thing where, who's getting appointed is a very political process. On this issue of taking away the elected position, we're sitting in Adam Byrd's district. Adam Byrd is in leadership. Have you had any discussions with Adam Byrd about this issue?
Yeah, absolutely, yes. Yeah.
Is there anything you can share with me about his position on the issue?
He has indicated that he is against this proposal.
Okay. What about the commissioners here? If David Painter's the head of the County Commissioners Association. Has he given you insight as to what his position is?
I would refer you to him for his position.
So I'm going to take that as meaning he wants to have another appointment.
I have had conversations with Mr. Painter, who is a very nice individual. I don't know that we necessarily see eye to eye on this one.
Yeah, that's what gets you to is that normally political people like you're obviously a elected official, but probably the coroner would be. Can you think of any other elected official that would probably be less political than coroner in a county in Ohio? But commissioner's very political, and if he's the head of it'd be interesting because in theory, the commissioners here, you have this thing as when somebody is the head of the statewide association, and our county commissioner is the answer. I'll go try to follow up with them, but is your opinion based on your association, or is it based on what's best for Clermont County? And that's a conflict. That can be a conflict. It happens all the time. Like that, you can doesn't mean it's bad. You just need to recognize that there can be a conflict there. But I'll take what you're saying as he hasn't given you his statement that he's for getting this out of the budget bill.
I had no affirmative or denials.
Okay.
It was a statement of fact.
Okay. All right. Anything else? I've kind of hit the things that I want to hit. Probably this is the most information the community can have about the coroner's office, and they've had a long time.
Yeah.
Here
I
or
am.
ever. You know, like
as coroner, quite honestly, I like to keep my head low. I like to come in. I like to do my job.
Yeah.
I enjoy my job, and if there's issues, please notify me. If there's changes to be made, I'm happy to.
I think there's usually a natural difference in even elected offices where there's specific professional credentials for the office versus offices where there aren't.
Okay, yeah.
You know, because you're a doctor, that's part of the qualification of office. You know, you have you said you're a part-time coroner here, and you have a pedigree and probably a responsibility to code of ethics as a doctor and so forth. You know, that is different than just, you know, I'm a township trustee or I'm a council member in New Richmond or something like that in there. So anything else that you want to hit on before we call it a wrap?
Boy, I sure appreciate your reaching out to me, making this issue apparent.
Yeah.
Right now, I think that the Senate is going to move to have an amendment placed into the omnibus bill that would
take this out.
Take it out.
Okay.
But this is one of those things you just.
Well, it certainly shouldn't be. Even if it was a good idea, it's an idea. If it's a good idea, it could stand on its own as a idea that has hearings in a freestanding bill and gets considered properly, not just jammed into a budget bill.
I like to look at facts.
Yeah.
I like data. My argument can be swayed. I'm seeing things right now quite obviously from my standpoint of view. If you're asking me if my job is important, I think so.
Yeah.
But I'm willing to listen to opposition, maybe I can be swayed to think that maybe.
You know what's funny is I don't know how it works in other states, but because of my wife and I having a place in Florida, and I'm very interested in this kind of stuff, I'll be like, how are they set up? You know, how do they set things up? And you know, and rather than looking at it like we're right and they're wrong, you know, it's like there's always a good opportunity to look at best practices.
Sure.
But that's what happens in hearings with a freestanding bill. Here's what some other states are doing that somehow works better than what we're doing.
Yeah. So there are two main systems for death investigation in the United States. There's the coroner system and there's the medical examiner system.
Okay.
Ohio is a coroner system.
Quincy was an ME.
Quincy was not a coroner. The guy who's in the suit pounding on his desk, that was the coroner.
Okay,
Quincy was a forensic pathologist.
But it said Quincy ME.
Well, he's medical examiner. he's not the coroner. I would say I'm rather biased that the coroner system is a better one. Kentucky, Indiana have medical examiners.
Okay.
You do not need to be a physician to be a medical examiner.
Okay.
But here's the deal: what does the medical examiner do? He contacts a physician to sign a death certificate. You must be a physician to sign a death certificate.
Okay.
So while the medical examiner would still decide what gets autopsy and what does not, you still need a physician to sign the death certificate.
Yeah.
I would argue that a medical examiner who is not a physician probably orders a lot more autopsies than not, only because there is not an understanding of.
Okay, they're not have the same discernment on what. You know, I forgot to ask. I know we're about done here, but how many deaths and how many autopsies are there in Clermont County in a typical year?
Typically, we run. Our office investigates 400, 450 deaths per year.
Okay.
We autopsy around 120 per year.
120. Yeah. Is that trend line fairly steady over time, or does it go?
It actually last year it dropped a little bit. I don't know why. But it in the years previous, our Clermont County's growing.
And I don't mean to jump back, but did the COVID era create more autopsies, less autopsies, or
no? Because COVID is a natural death.
Okay. But a lot of people on COVID will speculate. Like was it COVID? Was it something else? Was it? So those kind of questions, that's a very politically charged area. Mm-hmm. But is there, did you have a philosophy during that period, as to what should be, because there's a lot of, whether it's true or false, a lot of things of, death certificates having not the correct cause of death on it. that everything got COVID blank. Everything
Sure.
was COVID.
So a comment on death certificates. Death certificates document the cause of death, heart attack or stroke or whatever.
Okay.
It is a medical opinion. Quite honestly, is it the right one? An individual has lung disease, heart disease, kidney disease, and a previous stroke. Other than that, they were perfectly healthy. Well, which one did they die of?
So, and that would be, and again, I know I'm jumping back here a little bit, but I think it's interesting. So if that was the case, would that be a natural causes death?
Yeah.
Okay, like I got sick, I got COVID, I died of COVID. That's natural causes. And then, so I'm just processing in my brain a little bit. That is an element, but there's probably all kind of things where people, natural causes, what does the doctor say was the cause or the primary cause?
It's an opinion.
Which is different than we need to do an autopsy or something like this on this person because there's a question about whether it was natural causes.
Because it's going to go to trial.
Yeah.
Did they die of COVID, or did they die of COVID as they're driving their car down the interstate, or did they have the crash, but then coincidentally had COVID, and they really died of head trauma?
Yeah.
Okay, well, yeah, I get that. Okay, but this individual has been coughing, sneezing, feeling ill for the last 5 days and laying in bed.
Yeah.
Well, that sounds more natural than...
Okay. So you said about 120, you said, a year autopsies?
Autopsies, give or take. Yeah.
And 450 or so that you investigate. My last question, unless there's something else, is, so I read your editorial, I read the editorial in the Clermont Sun, which it seems, did the Clermont Sun, have they talked to you at all personally about that?
Not directly, no.
Okay, and the editorial was
posted
that, so what was in there was a kind of a press release from
Exactly.
the Coroners Association mainly?
From me.
From you, okay.
Yeah.
Okay, all right, anything else?
We got it.
Well, I thank you for the time.
Absolutely, no problems at all.